The old man had been sitting beside the road for nearly an hour, and nobody stopped. Not one person. Cars passed. Trucks passed. Even a tow truck passed. Yet somehow everyone seemed too busy to notice, or too busy to care. Interesting. Very interesting. Because sometimes people can see a problem without actually seeing a person. The afternoon sun hung low over the highway. Heat shimmered above the asphalt. The old man's silver sedan sat quietly on the shoulder. Out of gas, out of luck, and running out of options. Harold Whitmore checked his phone again. 3% battery. Not enough. He sighed, then looked down the empty road. Nothing. No gas station. No houses. No help. At 72 years old, walking several miles in the summer heat wasn't exactly appealing, especially after a recent knee surgery. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Harold Whitmore spent most of his life solving problems. Very large problems. Business problems. Financial problems. Corporate problems. Yet at that moment, a simple tank of gasoline felt impossible. He laughed softly. Life had a strange sense of humor. A few miles away, 12-year-old Jamal Carter was walking home. One grocery bag in each hand. A loaf of bread. Milk. Eggs. A few canned goods. Nothing expensive. Nothing extra. Just enough to get through the week. His mother had given him $40. 38 had already been spent. The remaining $2 sat folded inside his pocket. Interesting. Very interesting. Because Jamal treated every dollar carefully. Children growing up in wealthy neighborhoods often don't think about money. Jamal thought about it every day. The small apartment he shared with his mother sat nearly 3 miles away. The walk wasn't unusual. He made it several times each week. His mother worked 2 jobs. One during the day, one at night. Sometimes Jamal didn't see her for more than a few minutes at a time. Yet somehow she always found time to remind him of one thing. The same lesson. Over and over. Be kind. Not because people deserve it. Not because they'll pay you back. Just because it's right. Interesting. Very interesting. Jamal never forgot those words. Even when life wasn't kind to them. As he continued walking, he noticed a vehicle parked on the roadside ahead. A silver sedan. Expensive. Very expensive. The kind of car usually seen in wealthy neighborhoods. Not out here. Not on this lonely stretch of road. Jamal slowed. The driver's door stood open. An older man sat inside. Looking frustrated. Looking tired. Looking stuck. Most people would have kept walking. Jamal almost did. Almost. Then he remembered something. His grandfather. Years earlier. Before he passed away. The old man had once been stranded beside a road for hours before someone finally helped him. Jamal remembered hearing the story. Remembered how grateful his grandfather sounded. Interesting. Very interesting. Sometimes memories make decisions for us. The boy adjusted the grocery bags. Then crossed the shoulder of the road. Sir. Harold looked up. Surprised. A young black boy stood nearby. Sweaty. Tired. Holding groceries. Harold smiled politely. Hey there. You okay? The question seemed simple. Yet somehow it caught Harold off guard. Most people hadn't asked. Most people hadn't even stopped. My car ran out of gas. Jamal looked at the fuel gauge through the open door. Then nodded. As if that explained everything. Which, in a way, it did. You got anyone coming? Harold held up his phone. The battery indicator flashed red. Not anymore. Jamal looked down the road. Then back at the man. The nearest gas station sat several miles away. Everyone around town knew that. Harold knew it too. Which was why he had already accepted reality. He would probably be sitting there a while. Interesting. Very interesting. Then the boy surprised him. What kind of gas does it take? Harold blinked. What? The car. Harold answered. Still confused. Jamal nodded slowly. Thinking. Calculating. Looking down the road again. The distance. The heat. The time. The effort. Every adult would have understood exactly how inconvenient this situation was. Jamal understood too. He just reached a different conclusion. The boy set his grocery bags on the ground. Carefully. Then looked directly at Harold. I'll go get gas for you. Silence. Complete silence. Harold stared. Not because the offer wasn't kind. Because it was absurd. The nearest station was nearly 3 miles away. 6 miles round trip. In summer heat. For a stranger. Interesting. Very interesting. The old businessman had spent decades studying people. Negotiating with people. Managing people. Yet he couldn't remember the last time someone offered help so quickly. Or so sincerely. You don't have to do that. Jamal shrugged. A simple shrug. The kind children make when something seems obvious. Somebody should. Harold felt something shift inside him. Something unexpected. The boy wasn't trying to impress anyone. Wasn't filming a video. Wasn't asking for money. He simply saw a problem and wanted to help. What's your name? Jamal. Jamal. Harold paused. You know that's a long walk, right? The boy smiled. A small smile. Confident. Uncomplicated. I walk a lot. Interesting. Very interesting. Harold reached for his wallet. Instinctively. But Jamal shook his head before he could even open it. Just tell me what kind of gas. The old man looked at him. Really looked at him. And for reasons he couldn't explain, he believed him. He actually believed the boy would come back. Most people wouldn't. Most adults wouldn't. But somehow he believed this child would. Harold finally handed him a few bills. Enough for gas. Nothing more. Jamal took them, then picked up an empty gas container from the trunk. The afternoon sun beat down across the highway. The road stretched endlessly ahead. Long, hot, difficult. Yet the boy simply turned toward it and started walking. Harold watched him go. One small figure carrying a red gas can down an empty road, growing smaller with every step, until finally he disappeared over a distant hill. The old man leaned back against his seat, shook his head, and quietly smiled, because for the first time all afternoon, he wasn't worried about the gasoline anymore. He was wondering whether a 12-year-old boy might just be the most remarkable person he'd met in years. The boy disappeared over the hill, and Harold Whitmore was suddenly alone again. Interesting. Very interesting. Because now he faced a question he couldn't answer. Would Jamal actually come back? The old businessman leaned against the driver's seat and looked toward the empty road. Nothing moved. No vehicles. No pedestrians. No sign of the young boy. Only heat rising from the asphalt. Only silence. The kind of silence that feels louder when you're stranded. Harold checked his phone again. 1% battery. Then the screen went black. Completely black. Interesting. Very interesting. Because for perhaps the first time in decades, Harold Whitmore had no connection to the outside world. No assistants. No drivers. No executives. No meetings. No schedule. Just an old man sitting beside a road. Waiting. Back on the highway, Jamal adjusted the gas can in his hand. It was empty now, but it wouldn't stay empty for long. The gas station sat nearly 3 miles away. The walk wasn't impossible, just exhausting, especially in the afternoon heat. The boy wiped sweat from his forehead and continued forward. Step after step, the road stretched endlessly ahead. Interesting. Very interesting. Most 12-year-olds would have turned back already. Not because they were bad kids. Because they were kids. Jamal kept going. Partly because he had made a promise. And partly because he knew what disappointment felt like. His mother always said something. The same thing every time. If people trust you, don't make them regret it. The words echoed in his mind now. The way important lessons often do. A pickup truck slowed beside him. The driver lowered his window. You okay, son? Jamal nodded. Yes, sir. The man looked at the gas can. Then at the long road ahead. Need a ride? For a moment Jamal considered it. Then remembered what his mother taught him about getting into vehicles with strangers. No thank you. The driver smiled. A little surprised. Then nodded. Smart answer. The truck pulled away. Interesting. Very interesting. Because kindness often recognizes kindness. 20 minutes later, Jamal reached the gas station. The small building looked almost beautiful. Air conditioning. Shade. Cold drinks. Everything his tired body wanted. Instead, he walked directly to the counter. The elderly cashier looked up. That's a long walk. Jamal nodded. I need gas. The cashier glanced toward the empty container, then toward the boy's face. Sweat soaked through his shirt. His sneakers looked worn. His hands looked tired. Yet his eyes remained determined. Interesting. Very interesting. The cashier had owned the station for nearly 30 years. He could usually tell when someone was helping themselves and when someone was helping somebody else. This was definitely the second kind. Jamal carefully counted the money Harold had given him. Every dollar. Every coin. Nothing extra. Nothing missing. The cashier filled the transaction, then reached beneath the counter. A cold bottle of water appeared. Here. Jamal blinked. What for? The man smiled. Because it's hot. The boy hesitated, then accepted it. Thank you. The cashier watched him drink, then asked, Family stranded? Jamal shook his head. No. Friend. No. The cashier frowned. Then who? Jamal thought about it, then answered honestly. A man who needed help. Silence. Interesting. Very interesting. The cashier laughed softly. Not because the answer was funny. Because it was rare. Very rare. Jamal picked up the gas can. Now much heavier. Then started the journey back. The real challenge had begun. The sun felt hotter. The road felt longer. The container dug into his fingers. His shoulders ached. His legs felt heavy. Yet he kept walking. Step after step. Mile after mile. Meanwhile, Harold remained beside the road. Waiting. At first he expected disappointment. Then he expected excuses. Then he expected nothing at all. Interesting. Very interesting. Because experience had taught him something unfortunate. Most promises don't survive inconvenience. Especially promises made by strangers. An hour passed. Then another 30 minutes. The sunlight began softening. Shadows stretched across the highway. Harold looked toward the hill again. Still nothing. He sighed. Not angry. Just realistic. The boy probably tried. Maybe his mother called him home. Maybe something happened. Maybe life simply got in the way. The old businessman couldn't blame him. Not really. Then movement appeared. Far away. Barely visible. A small figure. Walking slowly. Very slowly. Harold sat upright. His eyes narrowed. Interesting. Very interesting. Because hope is easy to dismiss. Until it starts walking toward you. The figure grew larger. Step by step. Minute by minute. The red gas can became visible first. Then the boy. Then the exhausted expression on his face. Jamal had returned. Exactly as promised. Harold stared. Actually stared. Because something about the sight felt impossible. 6 miles. In summer heat. For someone he didn't know. For someone who couldn't offer anything in return. Yet here he was. The boy finally reached the sedan. Breathing heavily. Sweat covering his shirt. His sneakers coated in dust. Without a word, he set the gas can down. Then smiled. A tired smile. But a real one. I got it. Silence. Complete silence. Harold looked at him. Then at the gas can. Then back at him. For several seconds, he couldn't find words. Interesting. Very interesting. Because gratitude sometimes arrives before language. Finally he spoke. Jamal. The boy waited. What? Jamal looked confused. Why what? Why would you do all this for a stranger? The question hung in the warm evening air. A fair question. A logical question. The kind adults ask because they understand how unusual kindness has become. Jamal looked down the road. Then back at Harold. His answer came immediately. Simple. Honest. Uncomplicated. The kind of answer only a child could give. Because if my grandpa was stuck somewhere. He paused. I'd want somebody to help him. Silence. Interesting. Very interesting. Something shifted behind Harold's eyes. Something emotional. Something unexpected. Because suddenly the old businessman wasn't looking at a stranger anymore. He was looking at character. Real character. The kind money can't buy. The kind schools can't teach. The kind that reveals itself when nobody is watching. And for the first time all afternoon, Harold Whitmore realized this encounter might be much more important than a tank of gasoline. Harold Whitmore realized this encounter might be much more important than a tank of gasoline. Much more. Interesting. Very interesting. Because some people reveal their character when they gain something. Others reveal it when they gain nothing at all. Jamal belonged to the second group. The old businessman watched as the boy helped pour gasoline into the sedan. Carefully. Patiently. Making sure none spilled. The task took only a few minutes. Yet Harold found himself studying the child the entire time. The worn sneakers. The faded t-shirt. The tired hands. The quiet determination. Nothing about Jamal suggested privilege. Everything about him suggested effort. Interesting. Very interesting. When the gas tank finally held enough fuel, Harold climbed back into the driver's seat. The engine started immediately. A smooth purr. The problem was solved. Technically. Yet neither of them seemed eager to leave. Strange. Very strange. Because only an hour earlier they had been complete strangers. Harold stepped out again. Jamal. Yes, sir. The old man opened his wallet. This time he pulled out several large bills. Far more than the gasoline cost. Far more. You earned this. Jamal looked at the money. Then shook his head. No, sir. Harold blinked. What? The gas money already paid for the gas. Interesting. Very interesting. Most adults would have accepted the reward before the sentence finished. Jamal didn't even hesitate. The old businessman smiled. You walked 6 miles. The boy shrugged. Again. That same simple shrug. I said I'd help. Harold held the money out farther. Take it. No, sir. The answer remained polite. Respectful. Firm. Harold laughed softly. Not because he was amused. Because he was amazed. For decades, people had wanted things from him. Contracts. Investments. Connections. Money. Favors. Opportunities. Now a 12-year-old boy was refusing all of them. Interesting. Very interesting. Then what do you want? Jamal looked genuinely confused. I don't want anything. Silence. Complete silence. Because Harold suddenly realized the boy was telling the truth. Not pretending. Not negotiating. Not waiting for a better offer. Truth. Pure and simple. Finally, Jamal accepted only the exact amount spent on gasoline. Nothing extra. Not $1 more. The old businessman watched him tuck the money away. Then he asked a question. Where do you live? The boy pointed toward the distant neighborhood beyond the highway. Over there. With your parents? My mom. The answer was immediate. Harold noticed something. No mention of a father. Interesting. Very interesting. He didn't push further. Not yet. Instead, he asked another question. What does your mother do? She works. Harold smiled. Most people work. Jamal laughed. Not loudly. Just enough. She works at a nursing home during the day. A pause. And cleans offices at night. The old businessman felt something tighten inside his chest. The boy continued. She's always tired. Yet somehow he said it with pride. Not complaint. Pride. Interesting. Very interesting. Because children often inherit the attitude of the people raising them. And this child clearly respected his mother. A lot. The conversation continued for another 10 minutes. Simple questions. Simple answers. Harold learned more than he expected. Jamal earned excellent grades. Loved reading. Dreamed of becoming an engineer someday. And spent most afternoons helping his mother however he could. Nothing dramatic. Nothing extraordinary. At least on the surface. Yet somehow every answer impressed him. Eventually the sun began disappearing behind the horizon. The day was ending. Harold knew he should leave. Instead, he found himself asking one final question. What school do you go to? Jamal answered. The old businessman nodded. Then memorized the name. Quietly. Carefully. Interesting. Very interesting. Because people who spend decades building companies learn something important. Information matters. And Harold suddenly wanted more information. A lot more. When it was finally time to go, Jamal picked up his grocery bags. The same grocery bags he had left hours earlier. The milk. The bread. The eggs. The simple necessities waiting for him to return home. Harold looked at them. Then looked at the boy. The contrast felt impossible to ignore. One person possessed more money than he could spend in 10 lifetimes. The other counted every dollar. Yet somehow the richer person in that moment wasn't obvious. Interesting. Very interesting. Thank you, Jamal. The boy smiled. You're welcome, sir. Then he started walking. Back toward home. Back toward the small apartment. Back toward the life he knew. Harold watched him disappear down the road. Again. Only this time something felt different. Very different. The old businessman climbed into his sedan and pulled onto the highway. Yet instead of heading directly home, he made a phone call. The first phone call after recharging his device. The call connected immediately. Mr. Whitmore? A professional voice. His executive assistant. The woman who had worked for him nearly 15 years. Everything okay? Harold looked through the windshield. Thinking. Remembering. The 6-mile walk. The gasoline. The refusal of money. The answer about his grandfather. Everything. Yes. A pause. Actually, no. The assistant immediately sounded concerned. What happened? Harold smiled. A boy happened. Silence. Confused silence. Interesting. Very interesting. Because she had no idea what that meant. Neither did anyone else. Not yet. Tomorrow morning, Harold said. I need information. What kind of information? The kind you normally find. His assistant waited. Ready. Professional. Efficient. Harold finally spoke. I want everything you can legally learn about a 12-year-old named Jamal Carter. A pause. Longer this time. May I ask why? Harold's eyes drifted toward the road ahead. Toward the fading sunset. Toward possibilities he hadn't considered until today. Because I think I just met the kind of young man this world needs more of. Silence. Then the assistant answered. I'll start first thing tomorrow. No. Harold smiled. Start tonight. The call ended. The sedan continued down the highway. Meanwhile, miles away, Jamal finally reached home. Exhausted. Sweaty. Hungry. His mother opened the apartment door. Immediately noticing his condition. Jamal. The boy smiled. A tired smile. I'm okay. Then he told her the story. Every detail. The stranded car. The gasoline. The long walk. The old man. His mother listened quietly. When he finished, she pulled him into a hug. A long one. Interesting. Very interesting. Because she wasn't proud that he helped a wealthy stranger. She was proud that he helped a stranger at all. Neither of them knew it. Not yet. But while they ate dinner, inside their small apartment, another conversation was already taking place. A conversation that would completely change their lives. And before the next morning arrived, a black limousine would be heading directly toward their neighborhood. Before the next morning arrived, a black limousine was already heading toward Jamal Carter's neighborhood. Interesting. Very interesting. Because while Jamal slept inside a small apartment above a laundromat, people across the city were researching his life. Not to find mistakes. Not to find problems. To find answers. Harold Whitmore's assistant had worked through most of the night. School records. Community programs. Public information. Teacher recommendations. Everything legally available. And the more she learned, the quieter she became. Interesting. Very interesting. Because extraordinary stories rarely announce themselves. Sometimes they hide inside ordinary people. At 7 o'clock the next morning, Harold sat inside his office. A corner office overlooking the city skyline. Glass walls. Polished wood. Expensive artwork. The kind of office people imagine when they hear the word billionaire. A thick folder rested on his desk. Jamal Carter. Age, 12. Excellent attendance. Excellent grades. No disciplinary history. Teachers described him using the same words repeatedly. Respectful. Helpful. Hardworking. Mature. Harold slowly closed the folder. Then looked out the window. Thinking. The 6-mile walk. The refusal of money. The tired smile. Interesting. Very interesting. Because the report confirmed something he already suspected. Jamal hadn't helped him because of who Harold was. The boy didn't know who he was. He helped because someone needed help. That made all the difference. Across town, Jamal's morning began like every other morning. No limousine. No surprise. No miracle. Just routine. His mother, Angela Carter, was already getting ready for work. Exhausted. As always. Yet somehow smiling. As always. The apartment kitchen barely had enough room for both of them. The refrigerator hummed loudly. The paint on the walls had started peeling years ago. Nothing about the place was impressive, except the people living inside it. Interesting. Very interesting. Angela handed her son a plate of toast. You sore? Jamal laughed. A little. A little. The boy smiled. Okay. A lot. His mother shook her head, still unable to believe he had walked 6 miles carrying gasoline for a stranger. Then came a knock at the door. 3 firm knocks. Neither expected visitors. Especially not that early. Angela frowned. Are you expecting somebody? No. Another knock. Interesting. Very interesting. Because some moments change your life before you even open the door. Angela walked across the apartment, unlocked the deadbolt, and opened the door. Then froze. Completely froze. Outside stood a man wearing a dark suit. Behind him sat a long black limousine. The kind usually seen in movies. Not neighborhoods like this. Not ever. Angela immediately looked worried. Very worried. Jamal stepped beside her. The boy's eyes widened. Several neighbors had already appeared at nearby windows. Curtains moved. Doors opened slightly. People watched. Because nobody sends a limousine into a neighborhood like this without attracting attention. Interesting. Very interesting. The suited man smiled politely. Mrs. Carter? Angela nodded cautiously. Yes. My name is Thomas. He handed her a business card. I work for Mr. Harold Whitmore. The name meant nothing to her. Nothing. But it meant everything to the business world. Thomas continued. Mr. Whitmore would like to meet with you and your son. Angela immediately became suspicious. What for? A fair question. A very fair question. The man smiled again. To say thank you. Silence. The mother and son exchanged glances. Neither knew what to think. Interesting. Very interesting. Because kindness often feels simple while you're giving it. Its consequences are usually much more complicated. 30 minutes later, they sat inside the limousine. Jamal had never ridden in one before. Neither had his mother. The leather seats felt unreal. The quiet felt unreal. Everything felt unreal. Outside the window, the city rolled past. Inside, neither spoke much. What was there to say? The limousine finally stopped in front of a large office building downtown. Very large. Very expensive. The kind of building people photograph. Thomas escorted them upstairs, past reception, past security, past executives, until they reached the top floor. Then a set of doors opened. Harold Whitmore stood waiting. Interesting. Very interesting. The moment Jamal recognized him, he smiled. The same smile from the highway. The same smile from yesterday. Nothing had changed. At least not for him. Mr. Harold. The old businessman laughed. Actually laughed. Then shook the boy's hand. I'm glad you came. Angela remained cautious. Protective. A mother first. Everything else second. Harold respected that immediately. Very immediately. He invited them to sit. Then spent nearly an hour simply talking. Not interviewing. Talking. About school. About life. About dreams. About family. The conversation felt easy. Natural. And with every answer, Harold became more impressed. Interesting. Very interesting. Because intelligence is common. Character isn't. Finally, Harold opened the folder. The same folder from his desk. Angela noticed. Immediately, her posture stiffened. The old businessman looked toward her, then toward Jamal. I learned a lot about your son last night. The mother looked nervous. Harold smiled gently. You should be proud. Angela's eyes immediately filled with emotion. Not because she didn't know, because she rarely heard it. People often notice success. They rarely notice sacrifice. Harold continued. I also learned something else. Silence. The room waited. You've been carrying a lot by yourself. Angela lowered her eyes. For several seconds, she couldn't speak. Interesting. Very interesting. Because strong people often become emotional when someone finally notices they're struggling. Harold reached into the folder, then removed several documents. Official documents. Prepared overnight. Carefully prepared. He slid them across the table. Toward Angela. Toward Jamal. The mother looked confused. The boy looked confused. Harold smiled, then said the words that would change everything. Jamal, I'd like to pay for your education. Silence. Complete silence. The room stopped moving. The city seemed to stop moving. Everything stopped. Because neither of them had expected what came next. And neither of them were prepared for how much their lives were about to change. Jamal, I'd like to pay for your education. Silence. Complete silence. The room stopped moving. Interesting. Very interesting. Because some moments arrive so unexpectedly that your mind needs time to catch up. Angela Carter stared at Harold Whitmore, then at the documents, then back at Harold. Surely she had misunderstood. People like Harold Whitmore didn't simply appear and change lives. That wasn't how the world worked. At least not the world she knew. Yet the old businessman remained completely serious. No cameras. No reporters. No publicity. Just sincerity. Pure sincerity. Jamal looked at his mother. His mother looked at Harold. Neither knew what to say. Finally, Angela spoke. Her voice barely above a whisper. Why? A simple question. A powerful question. Harold smiled softly, then looked directly at Jamal. Because character matters. Silence. Interesting. Very interesting. Because the answer wasn't about money. It wasn't about charity. It wasn't about guilt. It was about value. The kind of value that doesn't appear on financial statements. The kind that cannot be purchased. Harold folded his hands. Yesterday, your son walked 6 miles for a man he didn't know. A pause. He refused money. Another pause. He kept his word. The room remained silent. You don't see that very often anymore. Angela lowered her eyes. Tears appeared almost immediately. Not dramatic tears. Not loud tears. The quiet kind. The kind exhausted people cry. Interesting. Very interesting. Because sometimes the thing that breaks a person isn't hardship. It's finally being seen. For years, she had worked 2 jobs. Missed sleep. Skipped meals. Ignored her own needs. Everything for her son. Most people never noticed. Most people never cared. Yet somehow a stranger had noticed. Harold slid the documents closer. The scholarship covered everything. School tuition. Academic programs. Tutoring. Future college assistance. Mentorship opportunities. Everything. The old businessman had thought carefully about it. Very carefully. Because he wasn't trying to rescue Jamal. He was trying to invest in him. There was a difference. A very important difference. Interesting. Very interesting. Jamal finally looked up. Why me? Harold smiled. A genuine smile. The better question is why not you? The boy sat quietly, processing, thinking, trying to understand how a single afternoon had led here. Back on that highway, he had never asked who Harold was. Never wondered whether he was rich. Never imagined any reward. He simply saw an old man who needed help. That was all. And somehow that had changed everything. A few weeks later, the story spread quietly through the community. Not because Harold wanted attention. He didn't. Not because Jamal wanted attention. He definitely didn't. But people talk. Especially when something good happens. Interesting. Very interesting. Because bad news usually travels faster. Yet good news travels farther. Teachers heard about it. Neighbors heard about it. Church members heard about it. The gas station owner heard about it. Even the pickup truck driver who had offered Jamal a ride heard about it. Everyone seemed to reach the same conclusion. The boy deserved it. Not because he was lucky, because he was kind. Months passed, then years. The scholarship changed many things. But it didn't change Jamal. That surprised some people. It didn't surprise Harold. Character rarely changes when circumstances improve. It simply becomes easier to see. Jamal continued working hard. Continued earning top grades. Continued helping people. Teachers. Neighbors. Classmates. Anyone who needed it. Interesting. Very interesting. Because kindness had never been a strategy. It was simply who he was. Throughout high school, Harold remained involved. Not as a sponsor. Not as a benefactor. Something closer to family. They spoke regularly. Shared meals. Discussed books. Talked about life. The old businessman became the grandfather figure Jamal had lost years earlier. And somehow Harold benefited too. Perhaps even more than Jamal. Because success can make people wealthy. But meaningful relationships make people rich. The years continued passing. Fast. Very fast. One day, Jamal stood on a university campus. A place that once seemed impossible. Students hurried between buildings. Professors crossed courtyards. Dreams took shape everywhere. And among those students stood the boy who once carried a gas can 6 miles down a lonely highway. Interesting. Very interesting. On graduation day, the auditorium overflowed with families. Cameras flashed. Names echoed through speakers. Proud parents wiped away tears. Harold sat in the front row. Older now. His hair completely white. His movements slower. But his smile remained the same. Angela sat beside him. Equally emotional. Equally proud. Then Jamal's name was called. The crowd applauded. The young man crossed the stage. Accepted his diploma. And for a brief moment paused at the microphone. The audience expected a quick thank you. Instead, Jamal looked toward the front row. Toward Harold. Toward his mother. Interesting. Very interesting. Because some debts cannot be repaid. Only honored. Jamal smiled. Then spoke. The best thing that ever happened to me. The room became quiet. Started with a gas can. Soft laughter. Warm laughter. Then silence again. My mother taught me to help people. He looked toward Angela. Tears streamed down her face. And one day, I met a man who showed me that kindness comes back in ways you never expect. Now Harold's eyes were wet too. The young graduate paused. Then added, I thought I was helping a stranger. A smile. It turns out he was helping me too. The audience rose to its feet. One row. Then another. Then the entire auditorium. Standing. Applauding. Not for success. Not for money. Not for achievement. For character. Interesting. Very interesting. After the ceremony ended, Harold and Jamal embraced. A long embrace. The kind shared by family. Because that's what they had become. Family. Not through blood. Not through obligation. Through kindness. Years earlier, an old man had run out of gas on a lonely road. A 12-year-old boy had decided to help. Neither knew it then. But that small decision would change 2 lives forever. Because sometimes the road to your future isn't found by chasing opportunity. Sometimes, it's found by carrying a gas can for someone who needs help. And sometimes, kindness finds its way home.